This is Frank Fantini with Todd Eilers, who is the founder and managing director of a firm that appropriately enough is called Eilers Research. And Todd is a former equity analyst who has specialized in gaming technology, and his firm has quickly established itself as one of the expert firms in the industry. And Todd, you cover everything from land-based on through to all those sexy new things, like daily fantasy sports that everybody's excited about. So maybe we'll just go down from one to the next.
Sounds good.
Okay. What are the gaming technology trends from the conventional industry that you see?
Sure. Well, Frank, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Some of the key trends in the land-based, industry right now. Like Frank said, our focus is on the gaming equipment and technology side. So a lot of our work is done on tracking the overall slot market, slot machines sold, the install base of slot machines, replacement, demand, new openings and expansion. So with that in mind, on the land-based side, it's been kind of a tough go the last several years as the North American market matures. The replacement market really has been somewhat lackluster the last couple of years. We haven't really seen that kind of hockey stick type recovery coming out of the Great Recession. And the overall slot install base has also been relatively steady. It hasn't grown much. It's kind of stayed just shy of 1 million games. And new and expansionary demand, we had a nice couple of years with Ohio casinos opening and Illinois VGTs, but once those kind of ran their course, now we've kind of run into a bit of a dry spell with new openings. And so, the overall demand right now on the slot side is, flat to well, it's actually down when you consider Canadian VLT activity, replacement activity that happened last year, or essentially has concluded at this point. But if you strip out all of the kind of one-time VLT sales, the market's flat to slightly down. I think that the recovery in gross gaming revenue for the industry certainly a positive sign, and we are starting to see some initial kind of benefits of that starting to flow through to replacement demand. I think if that carries forward through the end of the year, I think that you could see a slight improvement in CapEx or capital expenditure budgets for slot machines on the replacement side for next year. And then we do have several sizable markets out there from a new and expansionary demand side of things, whether it's Massachusetts or New York. That should provide some demand on that front going forward as well. But those are some of the general trends that we're seeing.
There's kind of been a bull-bear argument about the replacement of slot machines. The bull market, the bull argument is that the casino floors, the machines on there can only get so old, eventually they have to be replaced, and that as the regional gaming economy has recovered, as you've alluded to, casino companies will feel a little more confident be able to spend money on new slot machines. The bear argument has been that there's a structural change, that slot machines don't have the same appeal, that the demographic is declining, and that maybe even slot machine companies have been their own worst enemies in the sense that if you wanted a new game 15 years ago, you had to buy a new cabinet. Today, that cabinet has multiple games on it. Where do you fit in that?
Yeah, I think the truth probably lies somewhere in between, as always. There certainly is some changing going on with respect to the demographics, and everyone's trying to cater towards the millennial, customer or demographic. Skill-based gaming has been something that Nevada and Atlantic City have both approved and has gained a lot of media attention. I don't think any of that's going to, have an immediate impact, but it's certainly, I think, a move in the right direction to try to spur some out-of-the-box thinking and some non-normal type development to maybe bring in a new type of customer. But yeah, it is somewhat challenging. You obviously have the bankruptcy of Caesars, which is the industry's largest operator in terms of casinos and slots. So that certainly doesn't help the suppliers either. That's been kind of ongoing for a while, and hopefully that will get resolved at some point. But that certainly would be a boost to the supplier sector as well once that's over with.
What's your take on skill-based gaming? Is it actually going to draw new people?
Yeah, I mean, I think that number one, it seems that technology adoption in the gaming industry, as you know, always seems to take a very long time. So I think you'll see on the floor this week, we'll probably all see a lot of applications of skill-based gaming, a lot of which probably is not quite ready for the casino floor, but will be at some point, maybe next year. I think you'll see probably a lot of misses before we see some hits or some home runs. Again, I do think it's a move in the right direction. I guess at the end of the day, it kind of depends on what the vendors try to do to adopt that sort of technology and apply it in the industry. I also think you need some supportive operators as well. I mean, just putting a skill-based game out on the floor and just leaving it there to compete with your traditional slot machines might not be the best approach. Maybe these games don't earn as much as a slot machine, but if they're bringing in a new customer that otherwise wouldn't have come to your casino, it's still something you obviously would want to try to do. So I think it's going to require some out-of-the-box thinking from both the operator and the supplier for it to work, but I do think it'll take some time.
Question I have is, regulators are so conservative, and rightfully so, to really capture that Mortal Kombat generation, you might have to do things that are radically different from what you have today, and maybe even radically different from what the companies are proposing to do in the next year or so. Do you think regulators are going to be able to keep up with and evolve as rapidly as the game industry evolves?
Well, they're gonna have to do a little bit better job, and again, they are moving in that direction. I don't think we're ever going to be in an environment where regulators are going to move at lightning speed, because there are some benefits to being regulated and make sure consumers are protected and to ensure the integrity of the industry. So there is a balance there. I do think that things could get better, and they probably need to and probably should. But I also don't think we'll ever get to a case where things are improved overnight, for sure.
And part of the reason I raise that is because if you look at the internet is all about empowerment. And the disruptive technologies, the disruptive new business models come from the internet. And generally, they don't come from conventional businesses that mind their P's and Q's and get their okays from the regulators in advance. And people kind of, vote with their feet. They go off and they go down to Double Down, and they spend lots of money there, or they go to Daily Fantasy Sports and spend lots of money there, long before anybody ever thinks about regulating them. Mm-hmm. And in that sort of environment, will the regulators ever be able to keep pace with the customer, if not the casino companies or the technology companies?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. There, like you mentioned, there's some the emergence of kind of interactive gaming the last several years. Started out with social casino gaming. You mentioned Double Down, which is owned by IGT now, was really kind of the first move into that industry several years back, and was met with a lot of skepticism at first, but ultimately has proven out to be a good move for the traditional gaming companies, especially the really suppliers and operators, if you include Caesars. And that's been a great business. It isn't regulated, and so you can do some things that and move a little bit faster in that sort of environment. The latest sector to emerge over the last year or two really has been Daily Fantasy Sports, DFS, and that's been a great market. It's a tricky market though, because the fantasy sports industry doesn't want themselves to be viewed as a gambling company, whereas a lot of other industry observers might include them in that sort of bucket, and so there's a lot of movement right now on the political front and the regulatory front, more so probably on the daily fantasy sports sector than the social casino space. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. We were talking earlier, I mean, you've got the sports leagues, the media companies, the gambling industry, and everyone's kind of trying to angle themselves to figure out how to best position themselves going forward. But there's no doubt that industry is really kind of moved to the forefront here over the last year. My partner Adam Krajcek covers the interactive space for us, and he had predicted that DFS, the market in terms of entry fees, would exceed the legal sports gaming market in the U.S. This year, and it is on pace to do that. And so it's a very large industry, getting a lot of attention. It'll be a fun one to track over the next several years.
One of the trends in recent years has been the rise of smaller competitors in the conventional space. Whether it's Konami, Aristocrat, not Aristocrat, but Ainsworth, Multimedia Games, and others have come up. The other thing a trend that's happened is that game design has been almost democratized as well. You've got a lot of third-party designers out there who now can go and sell their games to some internet operator or to a platform provider who previously maybe had to sell them to one of the large companies. How do you, if you had your crystal ball and you were looking at the gaming technology space 3 years from now, what will it look like?
Well, I think all of these companies will have a much larger interactive business. I mean, in terms of looking at the larger companies and where the growth areas are, a lot of it's coming from interactive. A lot of it's social casino gaming right now. But if we get a few more markets in the U.S. to approve real money internet gaming, which I think we will over time, that'll start to build. So I think interactive will be a lot more important. I think that we'll obviously have some skill-based games out there over the next 1 to 3 years, and it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I think that all of these companies, I think we'll continue to focus on providing compelling content. I mean, at the end of the day, content's king, and you got to have games that perform. But I also, what we find a lot, and we track the market closely, and hardware in cabinet design still matters very much. And if last year there was a lot of innovative new hardware designs on the cabinet front. Whether it's Aristocrat or Scientific Games now, and everyone really had some innovative hardware, and it's shown through in terms of performance. Now you also have to have a strong game to go with it, but we've always kind of countered the argument that it's going to eventually all be about the software and game with that dynamic, because it still does matter at this point.
Any other things we should touch upon in terms of gaming technology?
No, I mean, I think we hit most of the key trends. We're really excited to see the floor this week and kind of see the latest and greatest of what everyone has to offer. It's always a busy week and a fun week, and it'll be interesting to see how the floor looks this year with all of the consolidation that's going on in the industry. With the mega mergers and even a lot of kind of middle tier mergers, the floor's probably shrunk a little bit, and it'll be interesting to see how the large companies have kind of managed and integrated all that. But no, I mean, I think we've hit most of the key topics. One thing that you did mention was the emergence of kind of the non-Big Four suppliers. Some of those have been acquired now, but there's still some other smaller players out there. A lot of people have observed the industry are worried. with the mega mergers on the IGT and Scientific Games side, if they're going to be able to raise prices, or if they're going to cut back on R&D spending. I really don't think you'll see that. There still are some pretty viable competitors. You mentioned Aristocrat. They've done very well over the last couple of years and have taken some share in the North American market. But you still have other players out there like Konami. They're introducing a new operating system this year after several years of not doing that. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with them. But you still have some other small companies that are still doing well out there, like Ainsworth, Multimedia Games, which is now owned by Every Holdings. And you even have some smaller companies that have started to gain some attention, like Incredible Games or Incredible Technologies, and as well as Aruze, that's always kind of been out there and does well. So I think you'll still see a lot of competition out there, and it'll be fun to see what happens this week.
Good. Very interesting. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Frank.